It's all yours.
Thank you. Good day. Welcome to the balmy weather that we are having 1 week after the deep freeze was here. Ignite board members, planning and zoning commissioners, and mayor and council. We have set aside this time to share with you some information. Ignite Coeur continues to move forward with the selling of the Atlas Waterfront Development blocks, also known as areas on the map on the PowerPoint, with only 4 areas remaining to be sold. Areas 5A, Area 7, Area 11, and Area 20 as shown. The Ignite Coeur board is aware that the housing products price points developed at Atlas are well above what many families in our community can afford. The board is interested in evaluating options on how Ignite Coeur may be able to assist our community by developing opportunities to construct attainable home ownership, housing that is affordable to families earning between 100 to 120% of the area median income. That would be the definition of attainable home ownership. The purpose of our get-together and this workshop today is to discuss the following 2 items. First one, the public's realm, what it is that the city and Ignite's role in developing attainable housing. And number 2, council's support for the creation of additional Ignite urban renewal districts. Discussion today will include options for developing the Atlas project, areas number 11 and number 20, to include attainable home ownership, market rate home ownership, or a combination of both. The opportunity costs associated with those development options will be discussed, and including the timing of the intended reimbursement to the city from the Atlas Urban Renewal District. Attainable housing. One option is to develop areas 11 and 20 as attainable housing, defined between 100 and 120% of the area median income. Ignite has completed conceptual level cost estimates and believes it's possible to develop attainable housing in those areas if, number 1, the land is provided at no cost to the developer, but in a deal structure to keep the land perpetually affordable. Number 2, the dwellings are between 1,000 and 1,500 square feet in size. Number 3, the density is approximately 8 dwelling units per acre. And number 4, the project is completing using a fee development model. Second option for this area is to develop all remaining Atlas areas at market rates, maximize the development and the net revenues. That's important to the city as we look to pay back the loan that the city has on the land acquisition. The net revenues could then be available to be loaned to other new districts where developable land could be acquired, entitled, and then developed, with some or all of the housing sold at the attainable levels. The Atlas loan would be repaid with tax increment generated from within the new districts. This model is complicated because the districts must generate sufficient tax increment to repay the Atlas loan within the Atlas district. That district closes in the year 2038, as well as the availability of finding developable land, which we know is challenging in our great city. Another possible option under this market rate approach is to maximize the net revenues as stated, not loan out any of the Atlas district funds to any new districts, retire all Atlas project debt obligations, and move forward. Close it prior to its scheduled date of 2038. These options are early ideas. The board wants to discuss that with council, get feedback, and move forward. You will get information from our consultant here from Welch Comer. We have Tony Burns on tap to answer questions and look at how we help with attainable housing, look at a new district. So with that, I would ask Mr. Boyd to come forward and share with us this PowerPoint.
Okay, thank you, Troy. Planning Commission, Chairman Messina, Chairman Hoskins, and the Ignite Board, Mayor Hammond and council members. Thanks for having us. And Mayor Hammond, I don't know if you want me to take questions as we go, or do you want us to wait to the end for questions?
Actually, I think it's more efficient to take those questions as you go, because sometimes we don't remember till the end, or the
Certainly.
context gets lost.
Very good. That's the way we will proceed. So I guess if there's questions as I move through our presentation, I'm glad to take those. And apologize for...
Normally, I'm kind of a stickler for going through the chairman, but in this kind of situation with so many of us, I think you just need to speak up and throw out your questions.
Okay. So what Tony and Troy asked me to do was take us back 7 years in time and refresh everybody's memory on where we started to hopefully create a baseline of information of how we got to here today. And so originally when this started in 2017, the two objectives that the city and Ignite were attempting to achieve were taking out that 12 acres of waterfront property and making it available for the community and stimulating private development. And I think if we think back to 2017, 2018, we'll all remember that the real estate market was a little different than what it is today. The challenge with accomplishing that was the high raw land costs. So just in big round numbers, the Bad Axe parcel was purchased for $7.85 million, and Mike Gridley probably remembers how much the right-of-way, the railroad right-of-way, but it was over $1 million. There was some additional investment that the city put into it, so it's close to $9 million investment. So that's a challenge to recover that funding to reimburse the city. The unsuitable soil conditions that exist out there, which are not environmental, they're just unconsolidated soil, and the crazy topography, which you'll see pictures of as well later in the presentation. And then just the valuable waterfront not being for sale. So those were big challenges to overcome. This timeline is just to give you a flavor of kind of where we started when we looked at it in 2017. Ignite and the city did. The city purchased it. The community outreach really started with Councilmember Miller and Hillary Patterson when they did the Core Vision group, which was community groups that came out and gave ideas on what they wanted to see happen in that area. We picked it up on the waterfront park and did a lot of community meetings with that as well. Ignite did the financial feasibility study. We moved into a master plan, ultimately created development standards, did a PUD that the development standards were based on, or the PUD was based on the development standards, depending on how you look at it. And then we did our first RFP. The park started in construction in 2020, and we continue to do PUDs as we received market, we'll call it influence. And so one of the things that, Tony prophesized in the very beginning, what we start with and what we end up with is going to be different. And we're going to need to respond to market pressures as we move. And that's why we kept coming back to the Planning Commission and saying, can we have this little deviation here? And can we have this little tweak here in order to respond to some of the marketability elements? These are some photographs, aerial photographs we took in 2017, 2018, and you can see this is the condition looking up what is now the city beach, or the beach area here along the Spokane River, and this is the big concrete landing area. This gives you a flavor of the topography. This is what was known as Mount Hink. We now refer to it as Phase 3 because Mount Hink is gone. This is a bunch of unconsolidated soil in this area that we had to pick up and move around. Here's some old crushed concrete that we ultimately put to use under Atlas. So when you drive on Atlas, that's what's underneath it to create a nice subgrade. Here is another indication of the topographic challenges. This is a big hole. It's kind of hard to see here, and quite a bit of steep and unstable slopes we've had to deal with through that area. And this is a big one that I have to remind myself, 7 years later, I forget some of these things. But the shoreline stabilization project that the waterfront park accomplished is a really positive thing we've done for the Spokane River. And when I say we, Ignite and the city funding that, because you can see there's quite a bit of erosion that was occurring through here, and that's all now stabilized. And so when the surf boats go through there, you don't get that soil erosion like we did in the past. So going back to the very beginning, this was the first concept that was developed for the site. And you can see that the product type that's in here is a lot of townhomes. And at the time, Heartland, our real estate advisory, was running the numbers, so to speak, and looking at the product types we needed in there in order to pull out this 12 acres and still make the project financially feasible. It was density. And I'll give you some actual numbers here in a little bit, but you can see there's townhomes in this area, stack flat, either for rent or for sale condominiums, stack flat multifamily over here. This was envisioned as a commercial node on the west end. And I'll talk about that in a little bit on why that transitioned. And another commercial node down here. And you can see that there's a lot of kind of stacked product in here that we were anticipating at the market at that time. The market has obviously changed because this is a pretty good representation of what exists here now. Now, planning people, don't freak out on me that these are colored red, because I know when you see red, you think commercial, and they're not intended to be commercial because they are multifamily, except for a little commercial node right down there, which I think everyone knows about. That's a Doma coffee cafe that's going to happen there. So you can see that these first two RFPs, that this one and these two over here and Area 6 over here, these ended up transitioning into single family. We have single family here. There's twin homes here. You can see quite a bit of single family up in these areas. Twin homes here. These are townhomes. This is hoped to be a relatively dense multifamily, either for sale or for rent product. This is a commercial restaurant here and 22 units there, multifamily units here. And these are twin homes and a triplex right there. And then Dennis Cunningham's twin homes there. He also has some fourplexes in the back there. So this is kind of the current state of affairs, we'll say. This is, Tony will talk about this in a little later. This is area 11 and 20, and these are conceptually laid out in here as cottage court townhomes here and cottage court twin homes here. This is area 7, which is platted in its original configuration, but it can potentially change. The reason we haven't sold that, Ignite hasn't sold that, is because it's right next to Phase 3, and there's a massive amount of excavation work going on there, so we really couldn't sell that piece in that time frame. So a little bit of the land disposition process, again, to try to get everybody on the same wavelength here, baseline information. The reason that the city purchased the property and then turned it around and gave it to Ignite was because Ignite has the flexibility to dispose of property, considering not just maximum price. They can consider other factors of it. And so that's where the development standards came in, put the development standards together, created a PUD off of it, and then issued RFPs. And I'll talk about how those RFPs were evaluated in a little bit. That would allow us to both consider the price, which is important, but also the character of the product that was proposed there, and did it respond to some of the early values that the Ignite board and had anticipated to happen in there. And so this was a pretty good way to dispose of the land because we didn't have to just look at maximum price. One little note I'll point out to here, the group. When Ignite started down this path, one of the things that the board was concerned about was participating in the developer realm, that they were concerned about that and wanted to make sure that they were leaving enough meat on the bone, so to speak, so developers could come in, buy a block of property. So a developer would come in and buy this entire block of property. And in the development standards, there were multiple ways to develop that. It could be townhomes, it could be stacked flats, it could be single-family residential. Rather than Ignite dictating what would go there, they wanted the market to speak. And so when these were first put out, they were put out as block sales. And we did the math, and I remember Mayor Widmeyer, former Mayor Widmeyer, calling me, and I think his hair was on fire because he says, you know how much money we're leaving on the table? And I said, well, we had anticipated a little bit about that, and so this was the last time we issued these as block sales. From this point forward, every subsequent RFP was issued as a completed block. So pad ready, it's platted, you can buy it, and off it goes. And so that was the idea, to generate more residual land value out of the sale, because the higher the residual land value, the more quickly Ignite can look at reimbursing the city. A little bit more about the land disposition process. So far, there's been 10 RFPs. This is just a cover page of what an RFP looks like. There's multiple pages to it outlining the extensive rules Danielle's created from Holly Troxel, which are important, but we tease her about them because they're extensive. But these RFPs go out, developers respond to them. Typically, there is a desire, because as I mentioned, each of the areas can be developed in a different way, but Ignite will put a note in there that says, gosh, we really would like to see townhomes happen in this area. The RFPs are received. This group up here that's made up of Commissioner Metz, Commissioner Mandel, Tony Burns, and from the city, Councilmember Wood, Troy Tymason, and Hillary Patterson, they actually go through and score the proposals on the qualitative characteristics, because the proposal will come in with architectural renderings, a site plan, narratives, absorption rates, a bunch of information, and they sit down and go through this laborious scoring process, and then come together and evaluate them. Our consulting team just acts as advisors to them, so we'll get questions and we'll respond to those. So the 10 RFPs, there's been several RFPs that have been received and rejected. So for example, Area 13 has been out to RFP 3 times, but it's actually been looked at by 4 different developers because it's been such a challenge to achieve both what the market will support and what the review committee wants to see happen there. And one of the important components was a food and beverage facility. And so now there's an 8,000 square foot restaurant that is planned to be there along with the 22 units. The other important feature that the Ignite board had laid down is what size do we put RFPs out? Because if you put one gigantic RFP out and it's millions and millions of dollars up front, how many local folks can respond to that? And the idea is we want local folks, where possible, to be able to respond to RFPs. And that has occurred, and because we put them out in bite-sized pieces. So you see this pink area was put out was acquired by the Smock Development Company. They have a different name, but you guys recognize Smock. The Butlers have acquired this parcel and this parcel over here. These areas 3 and 4 were acquired by a national developer. Bluegrass, who you guys probably also know, is local, and they acquired this, and then they sold it to Atlas Building Group. Active West is over here, and the out-of-towners, the other out-of-towner, but Boise, so still in Idaho, is Area 10 and 12 and 13. A little bit of a density discussion here. As I mentioned, in 2019, we were looking at a very high density, north of 600 dwelling units. We anticipate being somewhere between 475 and 567, depending on what happens with 5A here, because as again I mentioned, we're trying to achieve a pretty high density here, and also depending on what Council Ignite, how they decide to move forward here in this area. The other thing is the type of product. We're kind of at the little bit of the lower end of the single family that we thought. The multifamily is pretty close. Townhomes are similar, and a new product that came on that we didn't super anticipate was a twin home. So a twin home is it's like a duplex, except it's owned by 2 different people. Where a duplex is owned by a single owner, a twin home is owned by 2 different people. So here's just some aerial shots to give you guys an idea of the product types that are out here. This is the areas 10 and 12 that I mentioned. This is where the Doma Cafe will be. These are single family products in here. Let me back up one. You can see the Butler products back in here. These are the townhomes that Toll Brothers doing in this area. This is area 13. So this vacant area here, you can see the edge of the park here. And I'll show you a rendering of what will happen there. This is area 6. This is Active West's product. These have been very well received. The architecture is very well done. There's some fourplexes that happen in the back there. This is the proposal for area 13. I'll just briefly mention here, in addition to the RFP review committee, there's an architectural design review committee. Hillary Patterson, Del Hatcher, the primary thinkers on that. And it's hard to tell from these renderings, but this has gone through a lot of evolutions because the developer comes in and says, here's what I want to build, and sometimes they're really weird. There's probably a more accurate word to say, but this has gone through a lot of revisions. Some of it's hard to see here, but this is the restaurant, and these are the multifamily units here. All underground parking, public plaza, which are the things we lobby for to make sure that there's public circulation through here, because the trail is right down here, the waterfront trail is here, so we want to maintain that view corridor and that public circulation through there. This is another one that had a lot of Hillary's and Dell's fingerprints on it. This is Area 5B. This is the Butler product on Lumber Lane, which is the north side of the development. This is a triplex here, and the roofs have changed. A lot of different things have changed on this from the original submittal in order to try to create a little bit of improved character. These are the ones that face out to the park, and none of us were thrilled with the flat roofs, but the kind of the thinking behind that is it allows the units behind to look over these and still have a view of the hillside and the river beyond. So these units, when you look out the back, you can look over the top of this. So those are some of the things that we work through when we're on the Architectural Design Review Committee. Just a couple more shots and then I'll wrap up here. This is the smock product that's up on, also on Lumber Lane. Mark Latham did these, and they've done a nice job being responsive as well in some of the comments. This is their twin home product. It's not a great rendering. Sorry, Mark, if you're listening. But it shows that, you know, this is a twin home, and it's got a lot of distinctive character because you can kind of point out the difference between this one and this one. Hey, I live in the one with the gabled roof, you know, and so those are important features of it. So that's my last slide, Mr. Mayor. If there's any questions, since there were none that go along, I'm glad to answer them, or I'll turn it over to Tony.
Woody?
A quick question. When we go back to the original, did we buy Mount Hink originally? Because it didn't kind of show there.
We did, and so I'll flip back to this. So when the city acquired the Bad Axe property, that was a portion of it that was acquired. The challenge is that there was no financially feasible way to deal with that. What has happened with the market, as you guys know, the market has exploded, which has allowed enough revenue to come through that Ignite could move this off-site and turn that into housing product, which is the point of this discussion. If you were a private developer, you would never do that, unlikely, because you don't have tax increment to consider. Or taxes just in general, even if the district is closed, rather than this creating no tax for the city and the other taxing districts, under whatever configuration happens here, it will create tax. And when we did the financial modeling for the Ignite board, they concluded that was a good use of the revenue that was coming off of this project.
Can you go back to that first picture and talk about the triangle?
Oh, yeah. Yep, sorry, I skipped over the triangle. Thank you, Chairman Hoskins. Yeah, the triangle parcel here was never in the mix, and again, through a lot of good work by the city and the Ignite board, that parcel was acquired from Mr. Douglas, who is here in the audience today, and it allowed a little denser development to occur up in here.
Well, as you point out, there's, I think, trade-offs going into this deal that, you know, we, the community, get 12 acres of waterfront. I don't know how many linear feet.
4,000.
4,000. A lot of linear feet. So knowing that, you know, in order to pay for that 12 acres, we got to make money, you know, and we're going to have to have development there. So there's kind of a trade-off there. What roughly is the value of the 12 acres of waterfront? And, you know, we're also developing it, you know, all the dog beach and the pool, all the stuff along there. What's the dollar value of that land to the community that we're getting? Granted, not everybody's going to be happy with every, you know, some of that look like high roller houses and this and that and the other. There's trade-offs. I'd rather have 2 restaurants. I'd rather have more of this or less of that. But 4,000 acres, 4,000 linear feet, 12 acres, any dollar value?
Boy, I don't have, maybe someone else in that industry has a better idea of it, but I sure don't have an idea of what 4,000 feet, if Mr. Douglas might, but I don't have an idea of what that property would be worth. The investment that Ignite made on behalf of the city, and this was through Lake District funding, the park was about 6.2 million. And that included all the shoreline stabilization, which was a considerable expense, and all the earthwork remediation in there as well.
It's a huge number
Yeah, it's a very big
of
number.
value that,
Yeah. Yeah.
So, speaking of huge numbers, how much money has been spent on the remediation of Mount Hink?
I should have been prepared to answer that question.
I have a bigger question. All of it. Most expensive dirt in this town. Pile of mulch to deal with, all of that. We have the land cost, we have the hink removal that hasn't stopped yet. We don't know how far down to a proper building level. We're gonna have to put buildable soil on it. Are we into micropiles, which cost a fortune?
No.
Let me keep going.
Oh, okay.
We've got infrastructure we've had to pay for. We've got signage at $430,000. We've got consultants. We've got this running spend, and nobody's telling me how much this costs on us, the taxpayers, and not a P&Z person, a taxpayer. The spend on this, the only thing you'd be able to put up there on Mount Hink is expensive housing to pay this back over time. You're not going to be able to afford to put cottages in there, and we're going to have to buttress the hill behind it. So there's a cost that's not showing up. We've got phase 3 concept. We've got a huge buttressing platforms. I need to know, I'm sorry, I started on Whistler Town Center 50 years ago. So, and I worked for the Shakes. I know what it costs to build this stuff, and I see no quantity surveys. I see no cost for this, and I understand why it had to sell to the millionaires and the multimillionaires in order to get the taxes back. But what I'm not seeing is what I worked for Marriott as a director of design. They don't own these properties here. They get some other sucker to build it. They don't own any dirt anymore. And I know how much it takes to build this stuff. I built all over the world. I built on coral. I built on sand. I cannot understand how we cannot see how much this cost. And we own it, this dirt. And yes, we have to put $1 million. Discussion of affordable housing on this, forget it, unless they want to clean these people's houses.
Let's get through the presentations
Well, I
before
need
we
to know
get
how
to the
much, he's
discussion.
mentioning numbers, and I don't see them.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I asked a
I don't see
question
them.
of how much we have spent public money on Mount Hink, and I want to know how big Mount Hink is, because I want to know the dollar per square foot of that dirt, which my guess is the most expensive piece of property in Kootenai County. And I want to know the numbers before
So do
we
I.
talk about attainable whatever.
Right, I need to know the numbers.
And that's what I'd like to see.
Yep, me too. What we spend, what the running meter is, and where this money stops.
Lynn, it's very easy when you're spending someone else's money to spend someone else's money.
Well, I've always spent Bill Marriott's money and the Shakes' money,
We're spending
and I had
everyone's
to
money
count
here.
for it. I don't get this.
So just to be clear, those numbers aren't at our fingertips here, but they've been at numerous Ignite board meetings when we've produced the financial reports. The Ignite board has looked at it, evaluated the costs, and made decisions whether to proceed or not proceed. That wasn't the intended focus of today's
Yeah,
meeting,
but
so we didn't bring that forward. If it's relevant in a future
Very
meeting
relevant.
or in a post-game show, we're glad to produce that, because it's literally go pull it off of an old Ignite presentation from, 12 months ago or 16 months ago.
I read from 2018 right through. I saw no full spreadsheet of any of those.
Well-
I see an annual listing.
And how is
Not
it
broken out.
irrelevant when this
Not
is the
broken out.
topic we're going to be discussing today, is that parcel?
Yeah, we need to get to the
Why don't we
bottom
have the
of it.
data?
It wasn't part of the information we put together, but we can certainly put it
How
together.
can you talk about development without talking about the dollar incremental tax and the incremental
Because the
cost?
fiduciary responsible for that analysis is the Ignite board. And so we've had that discussion at the Ignite board. They're the fiduciary with that, and so that's the way we've used. This is what we understood, and I think what Tony and Troy understand, this is a bigger, broader discussion about attainable housing. We can
It
certainly.
started out
have
as
an-
workforce housing, it's not. It's talking about attainable, it's not. We had this big picture, but I said, fine, we got to pay for this. But we need to know numbers. We can talk all the ethereal we want, But I think we need numbers.
Oh, and we can
We're
certainly.
digging ourselves deeper in the hole every time we say yes.
Mr. Mayor, would it be appropriate to call it recess so that they can get the numbers to us?
Well, what I'd like to do is go ahead and go through their presentations. They can still get the numbers, and
Well, it
then,
sounds like they're not going to get the numbers to us today from what he says. And quite honestly, I don't want to make a decision without knowing what this is going to cost the
well,
public.
we're not gonna make any decisions today anyway.
They want us to know if we want new urban renewal districts, and then they want us to know the public sector's role regarding attainable housing.
Yeah, that's not a decision. That's your opinion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to request we continue with the presentation and the
Yeah.
meeting move forward.
Yes, let's hide the numbers from everyone. Thank you. Continue.
So wrapping
No,
up
you
my.
can laugh, but this is public money. We're spending millions of dollars of taxpayer money here. Please don't fart it off.
To wrap up my part of the presentation, this is as Commissioner Ingalls was pointing out, one of the benefits that came out of the project was the public realm elements that are out there, which have been well received, and I think are enjoyed by a lot of groups. And with that, I will turn it over to Tony.
Thank you,
I have a
Phil.
comment.
Yes.
Sure, just a comment on that on the way. And I don't remember the numbers, but I know they'll be very easy for somebody to find. But there were multiple decision points from, and my perspective on Ignite, on the council, of when at first we thought Mount Hink was just gonna have to stay there and be kind of a walking little mini mountain trail. And then eventually, I mean, the opportunity came up to fill in the giant pit out on Ramsey, so it's not like that, I mean, it got moved, but it's not like we dumped it in the lake or it blew in the prairie. I mean, there's going to be a usable something there, and we made multiple decision points. I remember one of which is, were we gonna close the trail down for X amount of time? Because it would have been cheaper to run the trucks up the trail, but the decision body said, no, we want to do it, but we're not going to do that. So, I mean, I guess my bottom line, because we don't know what the value of what we're going to get out of that either. But, and I think there is some real opportunity for housing, so we'll see.
He
Yes.
said he's okay with spending money on something.
Maybe to Mr. Burns, he may be best able to answer. The amount of obstacles necessary to create this as developable land were pretty extensive. And I guess my question is, would any developer have been willing to do that without an urban design district? And, what would the cost have been? Or would it still be sitting there vacant land?
I have talked to 5 developers that are large in this area, and they walked this through, and they said it doesn't pencil. It will not make us money, it will only cost us and deeper in the hole. So I've talked to Gray Gervais, I've talked to a bunch of developers who might have stepped up. They said, no, it's too many hidden risks.
What happened is, you may recall, council may recall, is that, there are a couple of development teams took a run at the Atlas project when it was owned by Miss, I can't remember the lady that won the lottery. And what they wanted to do is to develop the waterfront, make all the money, and then just kind of let the rest of it kind of sit. They weren't going to do anything with Mount Hink. They weren't going to kind of do anything behind the waterfront. And the saving grace is what the city controlled the railroad right-of-way that didn't allow them access to the water. So the deal that was tried to be struck, was that if you want to develop the site, you have to do more than just develop the waterfront and walk away. And no one wanted to do that. And thus, the city council, in their wise wisdom, in 2017, decided to buy the mill site and develop it the way we're developing it. Mr. Mayor, I'll go ahead and start the presentation or continue on. So, as was discussed, the Ignite Board is interested in evaluating opportunities to develop attainable housing ownership. These opportunities could be in an existing district or in a potential new district. One question the board is currently addressing Is attainable housing an appropriate land use in the Atlas development? The Ignite Board wants to understand the City Council's position regarding the public sector's role in attainable housing, and if supporting, where in the community could efforts be focused? We're not saying it has to be on Atlas. We're just saying, does the public sector have a role in attainable housing? So for this discussion, Ignite has developed two options regarding the Mount Hinc area, areas 11 and 20 in the Atlas District. Question, should areas 11 and 20 be developed as attainable home ownership, housing, or at market rate? We use in the analysis, we use the AMI values of 100% to 120 as it was discussed. The attainable housing concept we will discuss involves building 44 townhomes on area 11 and 33 twin homes on area 20. Also note the locations of area 7. That was pointed out earlier. This is area 7 here, and then also area 5A. Area 7 is currently not planned for attainable housing and will likely be RFP'd in unison with areas 11 and 20. Area 5A is planned to be RFP'd in the next few months. This is a concept example for discussion purposes of what attainable home ownership might look like on the Atlas project site in areas 11 and 20. The estimated land value for areas 11 and 20 is $7.7 million. That's what we think we can sell it for once it's completely platted out.
Tony, did you say 7.7?
7.7 million. As you see the metrics on the side, area is about 9 acres, and as Phil and Troy pointed out, 73 dwelling units with a density of about 8 DUs per acre. Ignite engaged the Heartland Group to analyze potential attainable home ownership models and recommend a model for Ignite to use to create attainable home ownership on the Atlas site. Their conclusion is that a home ownership covenant model with deed restrictions would be the most efficient and practical model for Ignite to use. This model would require Ignite to contribute the property at $0 and would likely need a partner for administrative support. As you see in this graph, several product types based on the Heartland model could sell within the targeted AMI levels in the deed-restricted home ownership model on the Atlas project site. So option 2 is to develop areas 11 and 20 as market rate. There's 2 sub-options here. Sub-option 1, area 11 and 20 land sale net revenues combined with other Atlas district assets could be loaned to new districts referred to as an Atlas loan to create a traditional size URD or a smaller scale district. Either type of district could contain some level of attainable housing. This strategy would use the Atlas district's economic strength to help front-load any new district's capability to create value for the community. The tax increment from the new districts would repay the Atlas loan by 2038 when the Atlas district terminates. The challenge is finding available developable land that can generate sufficient tax increment to repay an Atlas loan in a timely manner. The second sub-option, number 2, is do not loan Atlas district funds, pay off Atlas district debt obligations, and close the Atlas district earlier than 2038, which would accelerate the unintended Ignite reimbursement to the city. Current modeling indicates that developing areas 11 and 20 at market rate would enable Ignite to reimburse the city in the 2026-27 timeframe, leaving approximately $6 million in remaining funds to be dispersed to the taxing districts. If areas 11 and 20 are developed as attainable housing, then the intended city reimbursement would be pushed out a few years to the 2028-2029 timeframe, leaving approximately $1 million to share with the taxing districts. This delayed city reimbursement timeframe would be the city's quote-unquote investment in attainable housing on the Atlas project site. As with any models, there are assumptions. Area 5A, 7, 11, 20 need to sell at forecasted values. Tax increment revenues need to materialize as projected. The legislature does not change the rules for Ignite's ability to access increment, and we hope no black swan events will occur. The chart on the screen illustrates Ignite's intended plan to reimburse the city for their investment in the Atlas project site. The top portion of the chart shows the city's investment in the Atlas site. The bottom half of the chart shows Ignite's intended reimbursement and strategy by district. So you see in the top half, the city's investment totals $9.1 million. The amount per district is calculated based on the geography of the district as it pertains to the Atlas site. Each district is a standalone entity, and no shortfalls can be made up by other districts. So you see in the bottom half, the Lake District planned to reimburse the city $1.8 million. The actual amount reimbursed is $1.7 million. That was due to a decreased sale price for Area 13. In the River District's 2024 budget, we have $1.9 million budgeted to repay the city for that portion of the River District part of that loan amount. And then the big unknown is the Atlas District amount, the 5.4 million, and that's kind of what we're talking about at this workshop. If we do attainable housing, it might be pushed out a few years. If we accelerate and do market rate, we could pay it back a little bit quicker. So that's the unknown timing for that 5.4 million.
Can we go back to that slide, and I can ask Troy a question? Troy, have we anticipated that $1.8 million for this year's budget or next year's budget?
Define anticipate, we've heard from Ignite.
But I mean, is that in the plan at all?
No, we've just been taking it in when it occurs, because the Area 13 sold on the end of December, and so we just credit that. Thankfully, we get to credit that loan when it's received. We're not forecasting.
So Area 13 is in the Atlas District. This says
Area
River
13 was in
District.
the Lake District.
Was in the Lake District. So River District is, it says 1.8. Is this new stuff? Is this new revenue coming into the city that we haven't heard of before?
It's one-time money coming into the city.
Mm-hmm.
Right. To be paid back on the loan.
Okay, so that goes into the wastewater account.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes.
Are all those funds, city funds that went toward this site, are they all owed to enterprise funds?
Yes.
Okay, so
So none of that money is general
Right.
fund money anyway, when it comes back to the city.
It is not.
Yes. Yes.
Well, you've gathered us here for our opinions.
Yes.
And first of all, you know, we all have our own kind of thoughts about urban renewal. I've been pretty vocal that I support urban renewal because I've seen some of the projects and I support the projects. So I know that I know that you were asked to come forward and bring us some things to look at, and so doesn't mean we're buying it or making a decision. We're just looking at it. So I appreciate that. I want to go back to, you know, what John Ingalls said about why we purchased Atlas in the first place. I was not on the council at the time, but boy, I sure supported it. I think we've always, as city, said, we've got to protect any public property we can that's waterfront and keep it generational. And so I would commend past council absolutely for getting that done. After I was elected, I was put on the committee to work on the Atlas project. And I'll just say that my instructions that I understood from the mayor at the time and council was go get our money back. Because we had a $9 million loan, and then Ignite, of course, took on a large debt trying to also develop the property. So the thought was we're going to sell this for as much money as we possibly can and get our money back. There was a lot of effort put into Performa on when we would get the money back, and Mayor Widmeyer and I, we really tortured Tony every chance we got with, we want it now, we don't want to wait, and we shortened the time as much as we possibly could. And so they're well aware of the city's position of give the money back. So there wasn't any discussion of let's make this affordable housing. That just didn't come up. So now we talk about it now. Attainable is, I guess, the term. All those developers that we sold to, they were not giving any breaks. They paid top dollar, and they were also told their product needed to be commensurate with top dollar land. So I think it's incredibly difficult to go back now and look at Mount Hink and say, we're going to give the land away for free, and you develop a smaller, less project. I mean, do we reimburse those developers that went all in and took all the risk? So I think that's a problem. Then we talk about, well, what is our role as government in affordable housing or workforce housing? And I got to tell you, I struggle with that. I really appreciate the work that's done by the group Maggie Lyons heads up. I think that's tremendous. As a government, if we can do maybe some tax incentives or waive some permit fees, maybe that's appropriate and encourage some development. But I do struggle with government being the developer. I think we'd be competing with private entities. So I struggle with that. I'm not 100% sold on that. So what do we do now? Well, I came and testified for the health district very strongly. I wasn't on council, but I was on the board at NIC, and I saw that as job creation. And I thought it was amazing opportunity. So I appreciate that urban renewal district. I'm not wild about starting a new one. I'd like to focus on that one. Dan's talked a lot about urban renewal should be job creation at this point. I'm kind of excited and invigorated about that prospect of shifting gears away from development to job creation, of using all of the tools to support, major industry, attract them here, work with the Economic Development Corporation. So I'm not, I guess, excited about building anymore. Just finishing up what we have and paying back the city so that we can pay back that debt. Just my 2 cents.
Olivia?
I have a question, Christy, and I love that too. I think job creation is really important. The one challenge I feel like the city of Coeur d'Alene has, and not necessarily Post Falls, because Post Falls has more green space, greenfield, is the infill. And so do we have any, what does that look like from a job creation perspective if we don't have the space and we have to do infill?
I think that's an excellent question. So I haven't been paying attention as like I should as what you're looking at in the health district. But
Yeah.
it seems like there's a lot of opportunity there to support business and industry.
Yeah, which we would love to have more going on in the health district, but unfortunately, we need some partnerships with Kootenai Health to make that viable, because they are a non-taxing entity too. So we would love to see some job creation in the health district, definitely. So, but yeah, I struggle with that too myself. I mean, that job creation would be great, but where does that, what does that look like in Coeur d'Alene is the struggle.
Your point of what does it look like? We have seen examples all over the country of governments getting into providing housing one way or another, either public housing or private housing with government subsidies. And before I would ever support Coeur d'Alene getting into anything like that, you'd have to bring me some very successful examples that have worked and have shown to be successful long-term before I would want to get into any of that kind of effort. Now, that's not to say we don't need it. I think our economy is hurt by the fact that we've got people at all different levels of income that are saying that for what they want in a home, it's not affordable. Now, of course, that's affordable or attainable, whatever you want to call it, is different for each one of us. But we obviously, as a government, can't control the market. And I am very suspect of public sector involvement in housing. If we can't do it on the private side, I'm not sure we can get it done. In terms of new districts, I think Christy has a good point. First of all, let's focus on the ones that we currently have in terms of completing the goals of those. I like the comment that was Christy's charge, and that is go get our money back. And, well, really, it's money that we borrowed from our enterprise funds, and they're both sewer and water will need those funds, and it would be ridiculous if they had those funds to have to borrow because we borrowed those funds. So we need to really focus on getting that paid back as quickly as possible. I think that makes the most sense for the city. This role of attainable housing, I think that really means that we're not as concerned about professionals as we are about maybe the service industry, and we don't want to become another Ketchum Sun Valley, where the service workers have to be bused back to another community because they can't afford to live there. We've never been in that situation, but certainly I think that we want to do what we can. But I think the city's responsibility in those regard is more along the lines of what are we doing in terms of our regulatory authority to inhibit that. If we're an obstacle, that's where we need to play a role. But in terms of actual funding, I certainly feel real skittish about that. And would other council people care to? Yes, I'll bet you Kiki would. Kiki just has one thought or so about housing.
I want to try to encapsulate all of this into a real brief statement. I don't know how that could happen. But I will start with this. I would beg to differ with the fact that affordable housing is not definable, because it is definable in Kootenai County. And I refer to the housing study, I believe I think it's page 9. And what it did is it broke out what our industries throughout Kootenai County into 5 different sections. When I looked at the numbers that were presented by Mr. Boyd on how attainable housing, I refer to it as local worker housing, because it really needs to be more specific to people who need to live where they work. Only 2 of those sectors could afford the lowest price home, which I think he has out of range by quite a substantial chunk. So I feel that it is definable as to what our local workers need, what they can. You take it and say this is 30% of this area median income at 100%, and that's what they can afford. We are the frog in the pot right now, and the heat is on, in my view. We are the next Sun Valley and Ketchum. Coeur d'Alene is that. It's already occurring. I look at that and say, if you had the $302,000 home, that's $2,100 a month that they can afford. Our teachers, social workers, cooks, it's not our professionals. It's all over the board that can't afford that. So those numbers are definable. They're in the reports. We have the studies. Another study that's being done right now, there's 5 different sectors and 2 cities that are weighing in on a commute ratio. And what it's showing is that from 10 years ago, our workers in all categories, all income categories, are by percentage moving further and further out from where they work. And so that these are stats that are real. They're not anecdotal. They're not a HUD development affordable level census. This is studies that we have that are current in real time. And that's where we're at with this. Does government need to subsidize housing? No. Does government need to work with private developers to get us local worker product done? Yes. And if we have the opportunity to work with Ignite somehow, whether we do loans with outside districts or whether we look at Mount Hink itself and put something together there, we need to, for the health of our community in every sector, take a look at how we're going to be able to provide home ownership. It must be deed restricted, income restricted, asset limited into perpetuity, and all those tools are there. We know the numbers, we know what the building costs are, and we have to set out, in my view, as a city, to put groups together to say, how do we get this done? I don't feel that there's in many of the other cities that I'm talking to, if you're talking about we need to do a tax incentive or we need to lower permits, they're going to call that a government subsidy no matter what, because we're taking money away that we didn't give to someone else. But we have to take a look at the real data here and say, where do we want to go? If you want to talk job creation, Councilmember Wood, I'm all about that. But people aren't moving here for good jobs because they can't live here. We can create all the jobs we want, but we can't bridge that gap between what those wages are and what our market is driving houses to be. So we, as a government, I think we've supported economic development in the past. We've supported all of these projects in the past. And what we need to look at is local worker housing and who do we partner with to get that done.
I agree. And because we've loaded up all million plus, we've also raised the bottom. So now that bottom entry level has risen with it. and that attainability evaporates. So you load all these people up to 270 days a year in Idaho, who don't live down there, by the way. My son's at Bow Apartments. That occupancy at this time of year, there's no snow dugout. They are not there. They're somewhere else. So these people are not even contributing to our workforce. They're
And
gone.
We have a, I'm sorry,
We
we
just
have a
raised the bottom.
deficit in housing, and I, like I said, I had a lot of points, but the stats are all there. We have a deficit that we didn't catch up from our last recession. And every Sunday afternoon, I look at the MLS, just scan through that. If you took $302,000 as of today, there's 57 properties available at that price point or below in all of Kootenai County. 57 properties. Of the 57, 44 of them are mobile homes on rented land. So you can't take that out of the equation when you have 4 3-bedroom homes available in Kootenai County right now at the price point that we're calling, or we're being told, is an attainable home. This isn't pie in the skies, whatever it is. This is real data that's been proven here in the last year or so. Sorry.
Any estimates on how much the shortfall is of housing, the need is?
I don't have the number, Maggie has it memorized. 25,000 a year, 2,500 a year would have to be built to catch up. Is it close to that? About 1,500 a year homes would have to be built per year in order to catch up with the shortage we have for our workforce currently.
Good number. Thank you.
Thanks, Maggie. Sorry to call you out.
So to follow up with your conversation, Kiki, one thing that we've been kind of floating an idea, just brainstorming at this point, because we don't know how legislation or anything would fall into the place here, but is the idea of the delta between creating the attainable housing and the market housing on Mount Hink is roughly 8 million, right? And so using that money, that delta, as seed money to create micro districts across the community, just to be able to still have that market rate housing within Mount Hink, because it kind of makes sense to your point. And so, but then there's pockets all over the community that do need some help and could possibly, there's challenges with that, as Tony will attest to, the fact that you need to be able to pay back that increment through increment, and so it has to be, we would have to do the analysis, basically. And so I guess it would be great to get your feedback on that and whether or not that would be worth even analyzing these micro districts to help with that seed money from the Atlas District.
I have a related question, Olivia. I don't know if we can go back to that slide with the dollars on it that we've pulled up a couple times, but this 5.4 million, does that include the 7.7 million for areas 11 and 20 as an estimate, or does that not include that?
No, this is just the reimbursement that the Atlas District owes the city, theoretically, for the reimbursement for the wastewater loan. So we're just showing here that we can repay the city back the amount they have invested in the purchase of the Atlas Mill site back in 2017. This is important to the city that they be reimbursed, and we're showing that we can make this work just to be about $100,000 short.
Right, but are you making it work with the sale of areas 11, 20 at 7.7 million, or with?
It works either way. It works either way. It just delays. So if we do market rate on 11 and 20, the city could be reimbursed a little quicker than if we did attainable housing. They get reimbursed either way. It's just that the opportunity cost is time.
And then I guess the other question I had was regarding keeping it affordable would be, I'm assuming, through like a deed restriction?
Yes.
And how would that be managed?
Well, that's just the example we have on the table right now, and we probably need a partner to manage that, as I referenced in there, I referred to. But it would be a long-term commitment by the agency and a partner to make sure that that works over time.
Tony, a couple questions. I talked to Tony earlier with some questions, so a little bit of this may be follow-up. To do the analysis of what Olivia mentioned of micro districts, so to speak, how long would that take to gather that information and do?
Well, it depends on where you want to look and what size we can actually look at district-wise. and we can look at traditional. I mean, we've talked in the past about, you know, the ITD ownership up on Ramsey Road. That 40 acres could be an analysis that could be done to see if that could be partial of attainable housing or not. And then, as you know, there's places maybe down on East Sherman that might make sense. It would just take time, and the board would just have to decide where they want to spend their time and energy.
And with that being said, so we know it's going to take some time. How does that impact the overall picture? We're not in a huge rush. The city would like to be repaid. I just want to make sure we're aware of all the consequences for our recommendations. So I'm asking, yeah.
But I think one of the speaking on behalf of the board, I think one of the outcomes they'd like today is to see if the city is supportive of attainable housing or pursuing the idea of attainable housing on the Atlas site on the Mount Hink area. Because that'll take some time and effort. We got an idea together about how it might work, but if we're really going to get into it, it's going to take that energy. We want to see if there's, you know, commitment, because there's a time value of money to the city at stake here. A couple of years probably getting reimbursed. So that's one of the things that the board needs to understand.
Let's see, one question that, it seems like at one point I saw a chart that had, you know, and somewhere in here we had a range for affordable, attainable workforce, whatever that, you know, 100%, 120% of medium income, and I think that translates to somewhere around $300,000 house or something. So it seems like unless all of these units are going to somehow fall in that like 275 to 3.25 range, which I don't think I'm hearing, I don't see how it pencils from the get-go, even with all the deed restrictions for the future. You got to, I mean, this. So I don't know, am I missing something there?
But we had Heartland do the analysis to show that if we were to give the Mount Hink dirt for $0,
and that's
to basically subsidize this effort, because somebody has to subsidize it.
Yeah.
So we give the land value for free, that based on, from the information they got from Valbridge appraisers, and the current cost of building homes, they think that we can get these houses built for those sales prices that would be close to the 100 to 120% MAI, or AMI. Now, as Kiki would point out, if we could go lower, go 80% of AMI, but we felt that this was a good target demographic for the Atlas Mill site to shoot for in this conceptual analysis.
So what would the houses sell for?
You see them up there.
The
302.
Can you see those?
302. The lowest one is 302.
So like a fourplex.
Okay. Oh, 302, okay.
Would sell for $302,000.
Yeah, okay.
A twin home for $480,000, cottage for $384,000.
Okay, now I'm, okay.
Well, I'll just add one more statement that I would certainly be interested in seeing the analysis of the microdistricts and how that comes into play in comparison to what we're seeing today with Mount Hink. I'd like to have all the information before us to be able to make, you know, further decisions and recommendations.
She doesn't want to see them.
Are you speaking on behalf of the Ignite Commission, or?
Which hat am I wearing right now? I am wearing a council member. That's hard to decipher, but a council member hat right now.
Yeah, I know.
Well, you know, the question that was put before the council is would we be open to some efforts to find more attainable housing, being a public sector and being involved in that. And I think that all the council, and please tell me if I am in error, that all the council would like to see more opportunities for to turn around what we talked about with regard to Ketchum and Sun Valley, and there are certainly other areas around the country, and I recognize we're already there to some extent, but I think the question really should be, would the council like to see our urban renewal efforts actually be urban renewal in terms of coming up with some strategies that you find you could do and would pencil to create some opportunities? I would really express a concern about taking that one section of land and making it attainable, affordable, whatever you want to call it, housing. I think that when you start segregating low-end housing, and I know that's a terrible way to express it, but actually I think it's a frank way, I don't think that's an effective strategy.
It's not social.
I just don't, I think that's a terrible way to do it. If they are interspersed among different levels of housing, I think the likelihood of success is enhanced substantially over just segregating a group of homes to be affordable housing.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to give my feedback to Ignite, because that's what they were looking for. I absolutely think that we need to create these partnerships and take a look at what we can do for local worker housing. So I would like to see the costs on Mount Hink, the analysis on the micro projects, the dollar package presentation come back to us in whatever amount of time. I absolutely know we're going to get paid back to our wastewater eventually, and I have an appetite for dragging that out if we need to. I don't think that Troy has told us we're in severe financial crisis by putting that out a couple of more years. So I'd like to see that happen. And I think we've got an opportunity here to talk about land trust things that can be a mixture, as the mayor said. We don't have to put them all in Mount Hink as cottage homes at a certain price point. You can do a merger of that as you put it together, and it can be managed by a third party. So I would really like to see those efforts happen and come forward back to council for decision.
Well, and I think the word infill is an appropriate word to describe some of what we ought to be doing relative to that. Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, so where to begin? I like what Christie said regarding workforce housing and that the government shouldn't be a developer. I agree. We do parks, we do streets, police, fire. These things we do really well. We suck at everything else, and I think if we had tried to do affordable housing, it's just going to be bad and a waste of money. And I can bring up examples from around the world where that's happened. Good point, Olivia, on where to put in the jobs. I mean, I'm always a fan of using urban renewal for jobs. I think you can afford the house if you can afford it. And if we were bringing in jobs, if we used urban renewal for jobs for the past 25 years, maybe there would have been a difference. But that train's left the station. There are three types of housing. There's high-end, there's market rate, and government subsidized. Affordable housing is not a thing. It's a political talking point. It makes us all feel good, like we're actually doing something. Attainable housing, this is from the internet, so trust it if you will. Attainable housing comes to be known as the more profitable government subsidized housing from the missing middle on up. Affordable becomes the term for households with very low income, which has little or no interest in for-profit developers. There you go. I think other things before I get into that. Service workers, yes, I think we're too late. We're there. We have people who work downtown who live in Sago, who live in Kellogg, who live in St. Mary's. We're not going to fix that problem. If we want to fix that problem, we need to work on transportation to get the workers here, because that's the problem you have in Kellogg and in Sun Valley and Ketchum. You have to get the workers here. We're there. That's why I'm big on parking downtown. These people are going to need some place to park to work so that all the rich people that we brought here have a place to eat. Mount Hink, you need to stop Mount Hink. You just need to leave it the way it is. There's something called the sinking cost fallacy. I believe you probably spent $7 million on it so far. That's a tremendous amount of money. Only government can burn through that much cash and have nothing to show for it. Just leave it alone. You give up. Make it open space like we originally planned. We could have saved the $7 million and paid back the city by now. I wish there was some critical thinking going on here that would have recognized that. The key word that I want to bring up is gentrification. In that when you do what urban renewal in Coeur d'Alene has done for the past 25 years, you bring in rich people from out of the area who live here part-time, who jack up the home prices and make it unaffordable for the people who are here now, the people who we're supposed to be serving. This is what you guys do, and it's what you've done. I mean, it's the data. gentrification from day one. And when urban renewal was created in 1997, there were people who came to City Hall and said, don't do this. This is what you're going to do. And it's been done. And seriously, that's what you guys do. So when you say you want to do more districts, all I see is more gentrification, more high-end homes for rich people that are unaffordable. The Atlas Mill site, there was an ad in the paper yesterday that said homes starting in the low 900,000s. What are we doing for the people who live here? Just stop. We need the money. We need the money in our budget. Close the districts early. Just stop and reevaluate everything you're doing. I believe in organic growth, capitalism. That's the way that should be done. We primed the pump there. I like the fact that what we did with Atlas was we primed the pump, we got development going. And that should have been all we really should have done. We should have just put in the streets, the sewer, all the infrastructure and said, hey guys, go ahead and do it. But the reason I voted against the plan is because we gave away control to the Urban Renewal Agency that has changed the plan multiple times. I was okay with Mount Hink being passive space. I think it still should be. And I realize that I'm like the one voice here, and you may agree with me on some things and not on another, but I want to service the people who live here now. And the people who live in this city who I am paid to represent cannot afford a $900,000 house. And that's what you do.
But it's not just people who live here now. We have to think of the millennials and the Gen Zs. We shouldn't be building this for who lived here now. We need to build for the next generations.
Christie, and then Woody, I'd like you to share your thoughts.
Well, my thoughts are all over right now. So. Excuse me.
Dan and I don't see urban renewal the same way, and that's all fine. I can think of tons of wonderful projects that they've done in this community, and I support the work of urban renewal. And once again, the $900,000 house was to pay for that park, which we all get to keep for generations. So I think that was the marching orders, and they carried out the marching orders on it. That's what it's going to cost for all of us to have access to that waterfront forever. Mayor, you had a lot of good points about how far do we dip our toe into subsidizing housing. And I would never mean to disrespect or upset Kiki or Lynn, because I don't want to do that. I'm really trying to wrap my head around how far in do we go and what's right. Maybe that's just some education for me. But I do struggle with going too far. I will just tell you on a personal level, I spent my entire career in law enforcement, working for the government, military, and then the city of Coeur d'Alene. At no point did I ever expect that the city of Coeur d'Alene would provide me with riverfront property. I would have taken it because I'm not crazy, but I never expected that the city of Coeur d'Alene would help me have riverfront property. Now, if there's opportunities otherwhere in town, that not the most expensive property in town, and it's not complete socialism, maybe that's good. But I think a lot of it, Kiki, is you've just been in the forefront. You know all of the different mechanisms of what's worked across the country, and not the rest of us don't know that. I'm not saying I'm absolutely opposed. I'm just very, very cautious, is all.
Christy, I think you've hit the nail on the head in that, and Dan, I think some of the things that you are frustrated about might be cleared up if you sit down and understand explicitly the third-party management model that has been talked about. And that is the land trust, I won't use all of the options together, but that you can do this with, it's not a subsidy, it's not creating the projects, it's not the government paying for it, it's working with fair market developing investors and putting together that private-public piece that gets the land price out of there, and we can do our part, but we don't have to control it or pay for it. So it can be done. And that deed restriction model, which limits income and assets from the property, doesn't have to be in the same piece of land. So it is available out there.
Well, that goes back to what I said about regulatory authority. Brennan?
Yeah, I was just going to comment to some of what Councilwoman Wood was saying, just being on the RFP process. So when we came in, there were two mandates: protect the waterfront, pay back the city. So in that first RFP, none of us were super happy, but we had to swallow that pill because it's like construction, right? You can't have it fast, quick, fast, good, and cheap. And so we couldn't have struck all three of those. And in 2019, maybe it was a burgeoning problem, but attainable housing was not on the forefront of our discussions. And I don't know if it was ever in the forefront when the city bought the land and asked Ignite, develop it, pay it back, if attainable housing was front and center. And so now we're here, and now the train has left the station, as Councilman Gukanen said, but every RFP process, we had the financial model and the mandate, land value, tax increment, public good as much as possible. We also didn't get as much density as we wanted. We didn't get as much commercial because the market, a lot happened between 2019 and today, right? So the demand for commercial space went down. We threw out so many test balloons to developers. I mean, we have to take those signals. So I think we take our responsibility with the public money very seriously, but just as a reminder that the mandates were not attainable housing out of the gates. Had it been so, and also we're not dumb in Ignite, we know what our statutory limitations are. So, now we're presented, but I think to go back and say we started off on the wrong foot is misjudging what the mandates were, what the charge was to Ignite, which was protect the waterfront for the public, develop that for public use, and repay the city through land value and tax increment. And that has been the calculus every RFP, even though the model and the finances and the world has changed. Those have been our driving criteria. And product mix, right? Not just huge single-family homes, but it's not, it's not even almost attainable based on what Kiki was saying. It may only crack the nut on the different segments. And so that is a risk too. We could have Mount Hink, and I've never had so much discussion about something called Mount Hink. It could not even get us close to covering that gap, right? If it's almost attainable, is that enough, right? Or is it just for, Fort Grounds is it's like we're all priced out. It's not just Atlas, right? And so is that the right place? And if we get close enough, is that actually meaningful to the community, to the workforce? Or are we just going to strike out there also?
I think that we ought to separate those remaining parcels from the discussion on attainable housing. I think there really ought to be two separate issues. I think that Ignite ought to move forward and do what they can so that we can get our loans paid back as quickly as possible. But what I would also suggest is that working with your staff, you come back to us with a couple of things. One is, I think that it's fair for us to know, and I'd like to know, exactly where we are in terms of the finances. In other words, where are you in terms of your own indebtedness in this project, and where are you in terms of relieving us of our indebtedness on this project? And then secondly, what might Ignite be able to offer in terms of helping the city with its attainable housing issue? What's the term you use, Kiki?
I use local workers.
Local worker housing. I like that term the best. Mainly, from my perspective, it's an issue, it's an economics issue as much as it is an issue of providing that housing. In other words, we have a lot of small businesses in this community who are still struggling to find enough workers. And some of that is there's too many retirees moving in instead of young people. Well, that's a large part of it, but also it is the affordable housing issue. And so we actually can help the economics of our area if we can start digging at a solution for local worker housing. And I would hope that then you could come back to us and provide some proposals that you might think make sense financially and would fit this area.
Mr. Mayor, can we maybe add a little bit to that?
You can add all you want.
I'm just curious also, how can the city help with job creation for large companies? What can we do to help ignite in that regard too? Because I think it goes hand in hand.
Yeah.
Well, just as I've heard everything and pretty much been in on this from the beginning with a combination of hands, and when we had the opportunity, and then, you know, it was a big deal and a decision point to end up like essentially dedicating all of that riverfront to, you know, the waterfront to public space, and at different points as well. Yeah, maybe some of this, but I mean, we did the whole thing. And I think in the long run, that's kind of like a Tubbs Hill size kind of thing to the public. But then it was always, I think what I heard was very much, yeah, we borrowed that money and we got to get it back, and we got to get it back as soon as we can, and never until pretty much very late in the game that, you know, when, you know, affordable workforce housing, whatever, was really an issue, you know, well, gee, could that be part of something there? But it was never from the beginning. From the beginning, in my mind, especially after we took out the waterfront, it's like we've got to maximize what's left to, that's our charge, to both pay back the city and do other things, you know, going forward. And so for me, I guess to hear that, you know, yeah, that's still kind of the thing, is to, you know, we need to have the infill and all of that. You know, I'm an old habitat guy too, so the infill and stuff and all of the potential. But when I look around city, and as a guy, you know, born and raised, that's not, you know, given the whole mixture of it, yeah, that's not where you'd put just a corner of the thing. You know, and again, the whole Mount Hank, not to belabor, but the other side of Ramsey used to be a big pit and all of that. And now when you look at Croc Center and ball fields, we did pretty good moving stuff in there. And so I think, to me, that gives me a pretty clear cut that, you know, look at that, maximize the income on that. The payback on this, get it done, get it finished, and then, you know, move, but at the same time, have this goal of working on housing in different pockets and policy decisions that we can make, and
Mr.
maybe
Mayor,
if we get one lot here or two.
Mr. Mayor, if we can, so we have what's Jobs Plus called now? I don't know the names. Everyone changes their names. We need to work with them. We need to get together with the big cities. We need to get together with the county, and we need to work together to tackle the issue of jobs. It has to be a county-wide thing. And I know when you were in the legislature, didn't you and Frank Henderson and Bob Nonini work on some kind of economic thing for this area? If we could get that going and get some momentum going, then we can actually, I think, apply ourselves toward bringing in those jobs.
I would just disagree a little bit, that the big cities are not our model to follow, that we need to follow the small communities like we are. They have different needs in the big cities. Big cities have vacant buildings that they can convert to housing.
I'm sorry, I was referring to the big cities in the county, like Post Falls, Coeur d'Alene,
No,
Hayden,
I'm talking about,
Rathdrum.
when you refer to big cities, I'm looking at big cities.
I was referring in Kootenai County, so those are the big cities in
all right.
Kootenai County, but yeah, New
But I
York can
think
go
we
to
keep
hell.
it, we follow the
Houston
model.
can go to hell. But
He's like a
no,
man, you know.
but I'm talking about getting together on a higher level so we can all work together on this and tackle it, because it's a problem that affects us all.
Yes.
And we can't deal with it here just on our own.
And quite frankly, that's what we did originally when Jobs Plus was formed, is that we worked as a county, not as the city of Coeur d'Alene.
Well, let's show them the love and get it going.
Kiki wants one more shot.
My last one, and it's on a comment that was made about legislative issues. So I mean, we're here to provide feedback to the Ignite group. And a couple things. One, that Dan, I think it'd be great for us to hear from Jenny Gilliam on what their conversation surrounding housing is with the tech hub coming in. That is a huge job creation effort that is happening, and they have an underlying deep concern about availability for housing for people that they need to work. So creating the job piece isn't in my wheelhouse as up here as backfilling with housing so that those types of jobs have employees to live in. But there was a comment made earlier about what would happen if we moved into some sort of expanded districts or smaller districts or whatever you're calling, micro districts you're calling them, in that I would hope Ignite does the research to bring back to us that if we did choose to go that way, there are sideboards on those districts that the legislature can't come in and change urban renewal plans, pull the rug out from under us in the middle of the ballgame. I'm already
can't
hearing
change
conversations about urban renewal conversations at the state level. So I just am giving you feedback that I hope that there's a way that there could be some assurances that those to council that those districts will be able to finish regardless of what happens. I know, magic, make the magic happen, but just have that conversation involved.
Well, in Idaho, we have very little economic development tools to work with, and urban renewal is one of our only ones. And Chris and I sit on the Jobs Plus board as well as liaison, as well as the mayor and Troy, and so they definitely have affordable housing on their docket. But again, Idaho is very limited in economic development tools, and so I think one way, I mean, the fact that we're having this conversation and educating each other on all of our issues is huge, because Post Falls is looking at the same thing. Rathdrum's looking at the same thing. We need to be able to go down to Boise and really lobby to our legislators that we utilize these economic development tools, and we need to leverage them in the right ways. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there for
New
food for
crop of
thought.
legislators will try.
Yes.
Can I just say one quick thing too? I appreciate what Brennan said from the Ignite CdA standpoint is we couldn't make the Atlas Mill site pencil in the beginning with all that water going, all that waterfront land staying public. And we were scared, I mean, we were very nervous that we could even pay the city back over a 30-year period at the time that we were doing the analysis. And things have changed dramatically, and we find ourselves in a position we didn't expect to be. And what we're trying to do with the city council and with the planning responsibility until about a year ago, maybe, not even that long, that we even started considering it, that the district could afford it and pay the city back. So we're trying to be the good stewards that you want us to be, and saying we find ourselves in a position as an Ignite, as the entity with the Atlas District, of having more money than we have district to spend it on. And this is an option. Micro districts are an option. Shutting the district early is an option. So we're trying to be very open and upfront and straightforward with you about what the options are now that we see them as they exist today. And we need guidance from the city as to what direction they want us to go.
I'm sure that you all have a lot more wisdom to share, but we're already a half an hour over what we were supposed to be. So please feel free to visit, but I think we need to officially adjourn.
Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to make a motion to adjourn, but I have a quick question, really quick. Does Ignite Tony have what he needs to be able to move forward? Because I've heard a lot of different perspectives, and I want to make sure that council gives clear direction to the Ignite leadership.
So I'll speak on behalf of the board. The board is very close to having to make a decision of taking a left or right on the Mount Hank site. We either need to go attainable or we need to go market rate, because we need to put the infrastructure in, we need to put the roads in for what we're going to develop there. So the time is very short from what we need to make a decision, what they need to make a decision. So what I've heard mostly from council is that, and tell me if I'm wrong, is that attainable housing might not be the best choice for that site.
If you're looking for something more certain than that, we would have to list it on agenda as an action item and take a vote on it, so. But
I think we can move forward with that and present some draft data.
And I think a combination of attainable, I hate the word, of local work for housing and fair market can be done there, and it should be considered.
We had a decision we made years ago regarding the triangle piece, and I remember there were some of us on council who were pushing for affordable housing in that piece, but council ended up voting to make it market rate, and I would say that decision probably hasn't changed.
With that, I'd make a motion for adjournment.
Second.
A motion and second. All those in favor respond with aye.
Aye.
Opposed with nay. Motion carries. You two can do your own motions.
I make a motion to adjourn for the planning commission.
Second.
All
As much as I
That makes sense.
I'll also entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much for your time.